We all love a good story, particularly in our games. The feelings one has after finishing a story-driven game, particularly a game that led to a very rewarding experience, usually makes us want to seek out more of it. And many games do offer that. Through other media such as books, comics, and movies, we're able to experience an expanded story or universe. There's a balance, however, that needs to be maintained. A game needs to be able to stand on its own. What is offered in-game for a player to discover and is often supplemented by other things. But what happens when developers decide to omit bits of a game's story and utilize other media in order to get the full in-game narrative? Does it become a chore for the player or a money grab? Is such multimedia development a hint to the player that they're not going to get a full standalone experience when they plunk down their $60? When players have to work for a narrative experience, does it detract from the game, or does it help it? We'll take a look at these questions on today's episode of Downloadable Content. Next! Hello everyone, welcome to the penultimate episode of Downloadable Content Season 8. I am Brian, and with me we have Ron.
Hey everyone.
We have Ronnie.
I'm working to make everyone hate me this episode.
And we have the Shanna.
Hi.
Could not, she hit broke character, just laughed right out of the gate. There we go.
You broke me. You broke me, Ronnie.
30 seconds in. New record? Probably new record?
Maybe a new record.
Probably a new record.
But, you know, that's...
It's like when Daniel Bryan lost at WrestleMania, like 3 seconds? What was it?
Ooh, get that dig in there. All right. But yes, we are going to be talking about the idea of working for a story in this episode. But before we dive into the very, very laden discussion, we do have Ron and Ronnie here. Just throwing that right out there. You know what's going to happen. Every single episode can be found on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, as well as our website, dlcpodcast.com. You can take a look at our upcoming episodes, although there is only one more that will follow this, but fear not. Sometime during the holidays, I will be putting up the starting slate of recordings for Season 9 of Downloadable Content, so be on the lookout there. You can send us feedback, you can give us ideas for future episodes, or let us know if you even want to be in on an episode. We would love to have you. We are always looking for new voices, fresh meat. Take that as you will. But it is all there, dlcpodcast.com. All right, ladies and jelly spoons, we are going to talk about this topic today, working for a story. Now, this episode, the idea for this episode came from an opinion article that I read in Game Informer, and, you know, I don't really care too much for their magazine otherwise, but sometimes they come up with some really, really good opinion pieces, and I thought this was one of them, and this, you know, is deserving of an episode, so I hope you all had a chance to read it. Yep. Yes, I assigned reading for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. I gave them homework.
Third grade.
They had homework.
Which is honestly very fitting for the theme of the episode, let's be honest.
So,
I thought you were trying to do one experience, Brian. You didn't have to go outside of it. It's all just in this one little...
Ha
15th episode.
And already he found the plot hole.
Is it a plot hole or is it an exposition point?
You decide.
Hypocrisy!
Suddenly, Ronnie is dressed in his best Phoenix Wright, screaming objection. But
Absolutely.
But I digress. So, the article was written this past August, and the writer of the article was his idea was don't make me work for your story. Now he wrote it was an article that was mostly talking about Overwatch, but he also brought up other examples of games that have excellent full standalone experiences, like Mass Effect, like Halo.
Well, one thing I'll say, because when reading the article and also reading the comments for the article, the games that got brought up a lot all fell into one of three different types of difficult games. You have the games whose story is difficult because it requires material outside of the game. So books, novels, an anime, movie, whatever. Then you had games that were difficult to understand inside of the game. Ones that didn't give you a story unless you worked for it. Things like Dark Souls, where you actually have to go in and the story... You could play the entire game and have no idea what the narrative is, but if you dig in, there's a lot of story there that it makes you work for. And then the third kind would be ones that require puzzle or scavenger hunt elements outside of the game. Things like games where to pick a piece of the story, you need to decompile the source code, or read stuff, or go through stuff on their websites, or do other ARG elements to get their full narrative experience. And all the games kind of fell into one of those three buckets.
And yes, I read through the comments as you did, which, typically violates the first rule of the internet, never read the comments section of anything. But there was a long discussion about Dark Souls.
Yep.
And how in the creation of that game, the story and the lore are basically handled by the picking up of items and objects and finding out what their descriptions are.
Yep. The game has a very, very in-depth lore, but you really have to work at putting it together. And even if you read all the descriptions, you have to make those connections. It's not just like finding books 1 through 12 of the historical compendium that gives you a story like some RPGs have. No, it's this is a tiny piece of the story, this is a tiny piece of the story, this is a tiny piece of the story, and then figuring out how all of those connect or don't connect.
Welcome to playing jigsaw puzzles in 2018, people.
Yep.
But, they're giving you the story. Like, I don't think the article was trying to say that the writer wants his story to be spoon-fed to him. But, you get these little bits and pieces of story and lore, and, it's on you to figure out how these all connect or don't connect. And I don't necessarily mind that approach to storytelling. I think, I'm in a bit of agreement here with the writer in that if you have to go above and beyond the in order to understand the game, that's when you have questions of, then why did I bother playing this game if I'm required to buy books, comics, watch movies to understand what the hell, or to actually know what happened in my game. That can get a little cumbersome, not only both in time spent, but potentially money.
I'm going to throw my opinion out there, and I'm going to start this off strong. I think that this method of storytelling is incredibly good for a lot of people, and that it appeals to a different segment of the gaming populace. And if you don't enjoy it, it's absolutely fine, but it means that game's not for you. Because a lot of these games were designed from the ground up this way, so you couldn't just put the story into the game like that. Like, as much as some people might complain about the way Dark Souls tells a story, that game was designed that way from the ground up, and you couldn't really shove the story in there the way they were trying to tell the story. Like, it just wouldn't work in a traditional method.
Also, it's a thing to point out that for Dark Souls specifically, like, that genre of gaming, the thing that's important in that game is how fucking difficult it is and the mechanics of the game, not necessarily the story. Who gives a fuck about the story? Because when you're getting killed by this giant fucking dragon teeth vagina, that, like, I don't care about why it's there. I just want to kill this hideous monstrosity before it eats me for the 50th time.
I care about the story. I really like it.
I mean that, like, they designed the game from the start that, listen, there is a story here. If you want to find it, you can. It's mostly in the game.
Well, they spent a lot of time doing it that way too. Like, they segmented it away, so if you want to play the game and never touch on the story, you never have to. But if you want the story, it's there. They put the time in. You just have to figure it out.
Yeah, and, like, that's the point I was trying to make, is, like,
okay, sorry.
That was the kind of the thing I was going for, because, like, that's fine. That's the decision that they chose, and it's not like it's obfuscating it behind Overwatch, where there's basically nothing to hint at, like, what the characters do outside of their missions and the competitive aspect of the shooting stuff.
Isn't that the point of first-person shooter, like a multiplayer first-person shooter, though? Like, nobody's ever asked what the story is behind the guy from Call of Duty that you play randomly in the multiplayer. Like,
okay, so there's a difference between that, because when we're talking about Call of Duty, CS:GO, Rainbow Six is probably the most recent example I could think of. Like, there are quote unquote, like, operatives in Rainbow Six Siege, like, that have some backstory to them. I don't know exactly what it is, but, like, that's not the core of the game, and that's not how it's been presented to the fans that might want to play it. Think about Overwatch's first reveal. The first reveal is a goddamn story about Tracer and Winston stopping Reaper,
and it was amazing, and I would watch a movie about that.
And that's the thing, is, like, people saw this and they thought, okay, this is some sort of, like, Team Fortress 2 shooter game with, like, really compelling, interesting characters. No, it's just a goddamn fucking 6v6 competitive shooter with, like, mobile elements. And
I mean, if they didn't put any of that extra story stuff, they didn't have the movies, they didn't have the comics, they didn't have any of the stuff, I feel the game would still have been a success. The characters' aesthetics and the personalities that it showcases of the characters in the game, in playing them, shine through. I feel like all the rest of this, like, it's just like with Dark Souls. A bunch of people who've played first-person shooters are not going to give a shit about the story. I know a bunch of them that wouldn't give a shit about the story. So we give them that default version that has no story. You just go and do what you're going to do. But if you want the story, here, we have movies, we have comics, we have stories. We will teach you who these characters are. Now, I wish they'd given more of it, but that's not on how they tell it.
It's also a thing, too, that usually the stories are how they're going to introduce future characters. So it's not even a case of, like, it gives the feeling and sensation, in my opinion, that the stories almost become required watching, because eventually you're going to see a story that's going to reveal a new character.
Yeah, like the Sombra ARG, where they had to, like, decode messages to figure out who the new character was.
And like, for the most recent one for that they had for McCree and showing off Ash, like, we already know who's going to be eventually the next character is the giant lady robot that he rescued.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, Shanna, you guys still alive?
We're still here, just listening.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
Just taking it in.
I don't really have a dog in this fight. I have not played a single second of Overwatch. So you two knock yourself out.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but it's just like, to kind of like wrap up my point was just like Overwatch, I think, was designed with having this extraneous storytelling. Like, if you wanted to get the story, you have to go outside of the game to get it. And I don't agree with it, but I think that's also because I don't agree with how they presented Overwatch initially. Okay. In terms of how, like the very first trailer that I mentioned, like the Tracer versus Widowmaker thing. Like, I don't agree with how Blizzard handled it, but then I don't agree with how Blizzard's handled most of their bullshit in the past, like, 3 years.
Let me throw an idea out to you. If they had taken the exact same stuff, the movies, the comics, just everything they already did on their website, and they set up like an option off the main menu of a movie gallery, and as you play a certain number of matches, it unlocks these movies and comics to give you the story in-game, but it's still done exactly the same way, just through the movies and comics, would you have thought more positively of how they did it?
I would have enjoyed the convenience. I would have, and like the idea of being rewarded for my gameplay by having more story drip fed to me, basically. Which my disagreements with Overwatch are not in the story or the world that it's building, but more so how Blizzard's selling the game. If that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
To build upon, quite frankly, what you're both talking about, I see one main thing here, and that's, the whole idea of this expanded storyline is not a one-size-fits-all method. I mean, you're comparing Overwatch to Dark Souls, which are two completely different games. And I think with that comes the fact that there's many different types of gamers out there, and many different channels to go. So I think that this method might work better with some games than with others, but I know there's a lot more for us to get into with that, so...
Yeah. I mean, also, we're talking about, like, with Dark Souls and Overwatch, we're talking about two games that, even if not everybody enjoys the approach, their methods of storytelling have resonated with a lot of people. Let's bring up a game, or two games, where it didn't resonate as much with people, and that was Destiny and Final Fantasy 15.
Thank you. I was about to get there. Let's get started.
Shanna's ready. Shanna is absolutely
ready. You can't see me right now, but I am rubbing my hands together. Let's do this.
Where they're pretty universally derided for their method of taking important pieces out of the story and presenting them in a non-intuitive fashion.
Absolutely.
So
you go, Sean. Yeah, sorry.
I'll let Shanna go, and then we can jump in with whatever she may have missed. I doubt it.
Let her go. She wants this. So
yeah, I apologize.
The floor is yours.
Well, here's what I kind of felt with Final Fantasy 15. Is there a lot of homework involved in that game? Yes, absolutely there is. But I feel like there's examples of it being done right and of it being done wrong. On the right side, I will say the Brotherhood anime, in many respects, I think was done okay. Because it's really not 100% necessary to the overall story. You could play Final Fantasy 15 beginning to end and not watch the Brotherhood anime. And
if you want more time with these characters, you watch that. But it's not necessary.
Exactly. Basically, for anyone who hasn't viewed this or gotten involved in Final Fantasy 15, Brotherhood gives the backstory of your four main characters and how they got to know each other. It gives their history. So if you're like me and you loved every ounce of these four bros hanging out, I loved watching the anime. I enjoyed it. But you didn't need it to fill in the gaps. Where it's done wrong is Kingsglaive, which is the film that precedes the game. And basically what they did in the game was you have this big crucial plot point. You get to this point where Noctis gets on the phone, you find out, and by the way, big fat nasty spoiler alert, you've been warned.
Should I take my headphones off? Because I haven't played it yet.
Oh, please. It's within the first fucking hour of the goddamn game.
Okay, then it's fine.
Okay, I'm not spoiling the end or anything, but basically, you get this big crucial plot point. Noctis gets on the phone, finds out his entire home kingdom has been destroyed, and they basically just vomit a bunch of cutscenes from the movie at you in classic Final Fantasy fashion, where it looks beautiful, but you have no idea what the hell's going on.
Say that's not a spoiler. That was literally in like the previews for the game.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, for anybody out there who's living under a rock. Anyways,
okay. Yeah.
So you're sitting there, you're watching like this beautiful cutscene happen, and you're like, what is this? It's all cutscenes from the movie.
Yeah.
The movie, to be honest, I didn't feel it was that great. I didn't really like it. The best part of me was the post-credit scene, but that's just me. It gives you insight into what basically is the trajectory for Noctis's journey through the rest of the game. But you're missing all of these crucial pieces to it. You're missing, without watching the movie, you're missing why Noctis's father, the king, does all the things that he does and why this war started in the first place. You're missing out on what's going on with your main villain. And for one other thing about the movie that drove me nuts, and I know it really doesn't have much to do with anything, but it ruined the overall experience for me, Luna Freya has a completely different face in the movie than she does in the game. Which messed up continuity for me. But my point is, you literally took something that was so important to the game and you pulled it out and put it into this film. And that did affect the gameplay. That did make you feel like you were missing all of these different pieces, and it made you feel more removed from the gameplay experience.
As a comparison for people who've never played the game, I would liken it to if they took the entire Nibelheim event from FF7 and just took all of that past and just took it out and put it in its own thing, and you'd never actually see it in game.
But the flip side is when you see it in the game, you feel the entire experience, and you don't feel like you feel more close and more understanding of what's happening. I mean, yes, it is a big break and pause in the game. It is. It is like basically you just kind of stop dead and you're watching cutscenes for about 20 minutes. But when you
Xenocross, what?
I know.
Xenosaga?
When you pick up the controller again, you feel more immersed. You get everything that's going on, and it doesn't feel like a stopgap, so to speak. I feel like another example of this, and this is another game, but when they released all the DLC for Final Fantasy 15. And a prime example is you kind of figure out what, like in Promptos, you find out where he's been all this time. And because you're playing the game in his shoes, it works because it, again, wraps into the entire story, and now you understand his motivation. And the one thing that always got me is when the guys come to rescue him at the end and you see it from his perspective and you see Noctis coming at you and trying to free you, it feels like, okay, now I really get it. This just came full circle for me. And again, you don't really need it, but you also do kind of need it to fill the gaps in the story. So it's a dicey thing. But there's ways to do it and there's ways to not do it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I'm a few hours into Final Fantasy 15, and right before I started playing it, I said on Facebook that I'm finally gonna dive into this game, and one of my friends, Josh, was like, watch Kingsglaive first. And I'm like,
yeah.
And I'm like, you mean, I'm like, that's not in game? No, it's a 2-hour movie. And I'm like, oh, why didn't they just put it into the game? Why did they?
So that they can package it later and resell it to you?
Yep.
Let's be honest.
So, and, you know, to your point, Shanna, it's like, I feel like, why are you making... I've already plunked down... Well, in this case, I got it on a Steam sale for half off. No way was I giving Square full price for anything ever again. But,
I gave them full price for Octopath Traveler, and I have no regrets.
All right, and that's fine. I'm still, 5-6 years later, I'm still feeling burned by Final Fantasy 13. I'm just still...
still bitter.
I'm still salty about it.
I read somewhere that Final Fantasy 13 was still one of the best-selling games of the franchise.
Yeah, and they could shove it for all I care. I just no.
Well, it's funny considering how much hate it got.
Yeah, that's people like to hate playthings, but now it's like, oh, so I don't know if it was a good idea for me to be told right off the bat, you're not getting the full story right out of the gate. You have to watch this additional 2-hour movie on top of however long the game already is.
I think the ultimate problem for that is, I mean, there's a lot of problems, but I think one of the big ones is they don't make that clear to anyone who doesn't have a friend to tell them to go do it. Like, if you just pick up the game and play it, you're gonna be confused.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't learn that until I came across an article online that says how you have to, the order in which to do things to play Final Fantasy 15. And I said, excuse me? And then Kingslave and Brotherhood were included. You need a guide wouldn't know otherwise.
To figure out how to play it.
Yeah, like the initial idea of Kingslave was meant to be as a cut that cutscene. Well, how do you show the king giving the ring to Luna?
Nice save.
How do you show the things that Kingslave shows in a 2-minute?
I feel like there's things I shouldn't be knowing that you guys are talking about.
How does the king do certain things in 2 or 3 minutes that you need to show like probably 20 minutes to have it make logical sense?
But to your point,
how do you justify watching someone do a 20-minute cutscene? Because Final Fantasy isn't Xenoverse.
But to your point, that's also a good point about the movie. I mean, to be brutally honest, the movie has sections that are very important, and then there's a lot of things that, to the overall story, don't matter. I mean, let's be honest. Other than the king, Arden, and Lunafreya, you don't give a flying crap about the other characters, who are technically your main characters. They're the king's guard or whatever.
Yeah.
But they have all these plot points going on that are not going to have a single thing to do with the game.
Yeah.
And is it cool that it opens up the universe? Yes. But because there are all these pieces that are key to the story buried in that movie, you kind of are stuck watching a bunch of crap that you may or may not care about just to get some vital pieces of the story.
I think what we can get from what we've been talking about is that if it's done intentionally and designed in such a way, then the difficulties, then making it more difficult for the player to get the story can be rewarding. But if it's done out of laziness or greed, it is probably going to be received poorly.
I think with Kingslave specifically, I don't think it was done out of laziness to begin with. If anything, I would say it's over the desire to over-explain things.
I think it's they wanted to. I'll agree. I think for them it was they wanted to make this big epic event, and they went, okay, we're gonna have an anime, we're gonna have a movie, and we're gonna have a game, because Square really likes to try to make this world of things, and they went, okay, well, if it'll be better if we tie this in more closely, and like trying to make them more interconnected, but not in a way that supports each other, in a way that detracts from each other.
Well, I think you have to remember another important point here that goes even beyond just gaming, and that's we're kind of living in a big trend right now, which is just an overall entertainment, the idea of the expanded universe.
Yeah.
I mean...
God, fucking God.
But, I mean, think about it this way. The Marvel Cinematic Universe sort of changed the game for everything.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that this trend has been going on for literally 15 years now.
Oh, it has been.
And we're only just now going to see the progenitor of it actually potentially,
we're just now seeing the effects of it.
I would disagree. I would say if you want to take a look at, maybe what brought it to the mainstream, but if you want to look at other than going back to like the old Dracula, the old Universal movies, which all crossed over, if you want a more modern one that predates this, the Star Wars expanded universe.
Yeah, but
huge. It had games and and like all the stuff.
But you have to remember something. the Star Wars universe was niche as hell. You had people who went to go, like the general public went to go see Star Wars movies, but unless you were a hyper fan, you weren't going out and buying the books and playing the games. I think something happened where when the Marvel universe came about, the cinematic universe, that expanded to a lot more people, and that it became a bigger thing than just going to the movies. Yes. And the movie, and like with the Star Wars movies, a lot of them were just one sequel after another, and then they started bringing the prequels. You never really had something as intricate and crazy as the MCU, where it wasn't just one movie after another. It was all these different stories that they tied together. And I think that because there's such a big birth of fans that really got into that, both casual, non-casual, whatever, I think you had a lot of different forms of media trying to tap into that and see how it works, because it stopped being just this teeny little niche thing, and it really started to blow up in the general public more so than I think it has before. Just an opinion, but just from what I've seen, like there's big Star Wars fans, but not everybody was running out and grabbing books for Star Wars.
No, but we're talking about video games, which also depending on the genre is niche. And well, I mean, yes. we can all point out video games that predate the Marvel movies that did similar things to this.
But there's I guess what I'm saying is there's a difference between games that came out and had sequels and games that were literally
hack
on the idea
was what
of
I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
I would say hack was sold as this is going to be a cross genre thing where we're gonna have a series of video games and a manga and an anime and another manga, and all of them are gonna have their own stories, but all of them are going to interconnect. And if you want to understand everything, you have to do all of the things.
Right.
And that was in the early 2000s, way before Marvel.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But the thing is, .hack did not become a cultural phenomenon. It became a really big seller. It became a thing that certain people got into, but I guess what I'm saying is marketing teams and things like that weren't aware of the power of it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying MCU originated it. I'm saying MCU upgraded it to a thing where suddenly it's a public consciousness idea.
I agree with you. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was saying the idea existed beforehand in multiple forms.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was that it didn't catch the mainstream media of America's attention until Iron Man finished. People are starting to leave the theater, and then fucking Samuel L. Jackson shows up and says, "I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative."
Exactly.
And then you literally just go, "Wait, there's going to be another movie after Iron Man that actually ties into Iron Man being here? Like, what the fuck is that?"
I guess my premise here is video games as a whole were doing it beforehand, and these are becoming more popular because, quite possibly because of their familiarity with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but that I don't see any more games doing it now than since the early 2000s. I just see them being more successful than they were then.
And I think bigger name titles are not afraid to take risks with them anymore as well. I don't think you would have seen this in Overwatch or Final Fantasy or anything 10, 15 years ago. .hack was taking a risk. You know what I mean?
Maybe. Overwatch maybe, but Square's been doing this kind of crap.
Also keep in mind too, like .hack is a Japanese company, like Japanese through and through. There's so many Japanese bullshit in that game, in that series, that like this is an idea that Japan has had since like literally 2003 for .hack, if not earlier. So, and Japan's been known for some weird shit. So, Japan doing something like that doesn't surprise people. It's just the general notion of an American company doing it, like a media American company. That's the thing that made people go, "Whoa, that's weird." Mm-hmm. And and then at the time, people like almost do the slap your head and you slap the hand in your face and like, why didn't we do this sooner? Because we have this library of characters to draw upon with interesting stories and interesting backgrounds and this depth of history that we have available to us with Marvel and DC for the comics specifically, because you have literally 75 years of comic book history that you can like of characters, so you can go like, here's the ones that we think are going to sell well and give us really cool toys and merchandising, and and would be really cool to see on entertainment.
I think, regardless, we're splitting hairs here in that, regardless, what Marvel's done has definitely affected the sales of games that do things like this.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Yes.
I think, Brian.
Hi.
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 I want to make sure you hadn't died.
No, I'm still here.
Second of all, sorry to ask this in the middle of the episode, but when do you want to take your break? Because I have a big topic and I don't want to bring it up too close to it.
We're about 40 minutes in, 35, 40 minutes in, so, around 20 minutes or so.
Okay. I will hold this off then.
Okay. I had a point I wanted to bring up, just going off of Ronnie. He said earlier, talking about .hack. Now, it's one thing if you're announcing right off the bat in the creation of your franchise, if you're announcing it right away that there's going to be a bunch of tie-in stuff, anime, manga, comics, I think that if you're already going to say right up front that this is going to be a multimedia thing, I think it would not be, I guess, a frustration. It's not like Final Fantasy 15 where you have this huge epic game and then go, oh fuck, I have to watch a 2-hour movie? Or watch this anime?
Final Fantasy did do that, though. That's the thing with it. Like, they don't say it at the beginning of the game, but when they announced it, they announced all three at once, and they, like, from the beginning, they were always meant to be connected like that. That's actually the perfect example. Like, .hack, I feel like, did it right, but they both did the same thing.
Then I missed those announcements. Which is entirely possible. Final Fantasy 15 was in development for 8,000 years. That by the time it was, I had lost all hype and care out of that development, because I'm like, all right, Final Fantasy 15 is vaporware at this point, so I just basically ignored. Like, even now, apparently there's a Kingdom Hearts game coming out. I see a trailer for it. It's been 12 years. All of my hype has left about 8 years ago.
Let's also keep in mind, too, that there's been 4 different Kingdom Hearts games that have been released since Kingdom Hearts 2, and only one of them is actually fucking important to the overall goddamn story.
Well, that's yes. I mean, I went to see Ralph Breaks the Internet, and before the movie started, they showed a trailer for Kingdom Hearts 3, and I'm like, wow, Square really wants to make me think there's a game coming out at the end of January. That's nice.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
That's nice. Does Sora actually fit into those shoes?
It's funny because they made a joke about that in the second game. They literally made that kid outgrow his clothes.
Yeah.
So moving on to another thing I wanted to bring up, which also is mentioned in the article, but I've seen it in a number of games, and it's the idea of the in-game grimoire, the encyclopedia.
Which was Destiny, which we mentioned and then didn't go back to.
Right.
Because Destiny was a giant fucking trash fire that only just now is potentially solving its bullshit. But they burned some. Okay, so minor aside, here's Ron's first rant of the episode.
First, all right.
All right.
Have fun.
I played Destiny, the first one. I enjoyed it. I didn't get too deep into like the grinding or the rating of it, but I enjoyed it. There was a little long-winded, I found, but I enjoyed myself with it over time. I didn't have any desire to come back and play it with the improvements that they did later. But I enjoyed it. And then Destiny 2 came out, and I was like, all right, I got a PC that can handle this. I'm going to go play it, and I'm going to have a bunch of friends online that I'm going to play it with, and like, we're going to have a good time. And they've learned how to design a game from Destiny 1 with all the expansions, and they're going to take the improvements they learned and put them in Destiny 2. And it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be a really good game. No, I'm done with the fucking main story in less than 30 hours, and grinding is literally just doing 3 things over and over again and bashing your head up against the wall when they could have done like literally 10 different things that they learned from Destiny 1. And then the end game is like the rating content. Like, okay, cool, that's like what I sort of expected. but then you beat the game, and then you beat the writing content. Like, okay, congratulations, I beat your fucking content in less than a week. What am I supposed to do for the next 3 or 6 months while you design the next expansion or the next like major story element or next raid or whatever? And then, oh, by the way, we're fucking business, so we have to like all this cosmetic bullshit, like purely cosmetic, but people want to look fucking fancy in their goddamn space suits and their goddamn outfits and shit like that. Because why not? What they also do, we've already finished your fucking content, so all that cosmetics thing that you said that we could eventually get in game, but just by playing it for long enough, yeah, people figure out the fucking math for it. You need to play your goddamn game 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get it for free. Otherwise, you're gonna have to spend money on it. No, thank you. Bye.
So tell us how you really. So tell us how you really feel, Ron.
Ron dropping the mic.
He is. I think that's going to be the reason. It's like I think he is the reason why occasionally an episode gets the explicit tag on iTunes because of the number of F-bombs.
Yeah, the number of F-drops. I usually apologize afterwards, but sometimes you get going, you just can't stop.
So the in-game encyclopedia that a number of games have, and I've definitely played a few that have them, Xenosaga. So, what are your opinions on developers who decide to basically load the entire game's backstory into such a thing? It's an in-game reference. You can pull it up at any time.
I think it's really good when it's not used as a crutch. And what I mean by that is, if you build your entire game so you play the whole thing and you have no confusion, you have clear villains, you know their motives, you know the story. Awesome. You can give me this compendium that tells me this is the backstory for the kingdom that person was from, or here's some more information on this villain, or here's the thing. As long as the necessary information, what you need for the game to feel complete, is in the actual game. And then you can add everything else on top of it so it's there for people who want to.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Another example I was thinking was the first and second Mass Effect games, where they had an encyclopedia that explained all the fucking terminology they were using. You didn't need to know. You didn't need to look at any of it if you wanted to. You could ignore it and you'd be okay, because everything that they say it's not tangentially important. They just try and sci-fi explain away some of the fucking bullshit they use, which is element zero and biotics and like why are Asari blue and shit like that. Like they explain away a lot of the sci-fi bullshit for it, but it's not tangentially important to the story. If you want to like learn more about the lore, you need a refresher on like, who the fuck is this character? Why do I care about him? You can look at the encyclopedia, like literally pause it mid-game and go, oh, you're important for XYZ reasons. All right, fantastic. Now I know why I need to care about you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, one thing I'll bring up for it is, and it's been a while since I've played it, but Final Fantasy 13 had one good thing. And that was the fact that it had, in its compendium equivalent, a story thus far. So if you forgot what the hell you were doing because you haven't played the game in 4 months, you can go in there and go, oh yeah, we beat that dude and this is where we're going now. Or this is what we've done up to this point. Or why were we doing this again? I don't even remember. And it was there for people to go to. I think every RPG should have that.
Fucking men. I really, because if any of you, I have the perpetual backlog of video games. I will play an RPG for hours, and then, I'm like, okay, I need to move on to something else for a bit. I'll come back to this. I wish had something like Xenogears done that, I wouldn't have started and stopped and started and stopped and restarted and stopped, and like, there's literally been only, you mentioned Final Fantasy 13 doing that, there's only one other game that I can immediately recall that has that sort of feature, and that was Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid does that. If you put down the game and, next time you load your game, before you actually resume the actual gameplay, it gives you a what has happened so far. And
I know Final Fantasy 15 does it as well, because the chapter interludes explain like previously on blah 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 blah, and then it explains like what happened in the last like chapter you played, or explains what your goal is for this chapter.
Resident Evil Revelations does that as well. Yes.
There's a couple games that do.
But yes.
I suppose I would have found out that Metal Gear did that if I'd played more than an hour of the game and then decided it was trash.
Another good example of that is Kingdom Hearts. They literally write in that Jiminy Cricket keeps a journal of all of your little adventures. And it's actually kind of cool because they tend to bring in also some of the Disney character history and like when each Disney film that each character from came out, so that's kind of fun.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, but just going back to the subject of having things outside of the game, that is also one thing Kingdom Hearts did that was kind of helpful, is that there is a Kingdom Hearts manga. And I remember the first time that I played Chain of Memories, I absolutely freaking hated it. I couldn't figure it out. I was just like, this game is just making me angry, so I chose to skip it and I read the manga. And I got the story. I got the story of the game. You know, I didn't get all the bells and whistles that you get from the game, but I got the basic story. But I didn't need to read it to get anything else out of the story. You know what I mean? So it was a good way of receiving what was happening in that game without me playing it, so I could move on to Kingdom Hearts 2 and understand the beginning. So sometimes those things can kind of work out in your favor when you have something outside the medium to complement the game.
And that's just it. It's Mass Effect and Dead Space do this very well also. Like, Mass Effect, you can play the entire trilogy, and it's an entire self-contained experience. Hell, each game is its own self-contained experience. It's suggested that you play all three in order, but you don't necessarily have to. You can start each game at square one. What they do, what the Mass Effect novels and the Dead Space novels do is they're basically side stories. They're like, yeah, so while the main game is going on, this is happening somewhere else.
Brian, people who start a game in the middle, at the end of a trilogy and didn't play the other two are basically monsters. I don't know if you're aware of that. I don't know if that's going to alienate some of our listeners, but like, my brain can't comprehend that.
I agree with you.
I'm the weird one. I'm the one who's going, I want to get into Dragon Quest. I wonder where the easiest way to get Dragon Quest 1 is.
Yeah, I'm a little bit like that as well, but I totally understand and feel you. I'd be the same way. Now knowing that Dragon Quest, each game is its own story,
yeah.
Knowing that, it makes it a little easier to find a jumping on point. The same thing with Final Fantasy. But yeah, when you have Mass Effect, which is literally a connected story from beginning to end, the idea of jumping into the series at 2 or 3 just feels strange and foreign and weird to me. I mean, I get it. I totally get it. But you have the option.
And I will say this for Mass Effect 2's benefit is that when Mass Effect 2 came out, it was originally a PC and Xbox 360 game.
Yep.
And for Mass Effect 2, they put it on the PS3. And for the benefits, they have if you didn't play Mass Effect 1, you can replicate some of the major choices of it with the little what you did previously at the beginning of it. And they did the same thing in Dragon Age, and they did the same thing in Mass Effect 3. That you could replicate some of your major decisions from 2 and 3 for people that didn't play it, because Mass Effect 3 was then on PC, didn't have access to Mass Effect 1. Was it? Maybe I'm misremembering, but maybe it. But yeah, I know that you could do the same thing for Mass Effect 3, and that was an important thing. because people didn't play it, and they wanted to have people be like, yes, here are things that like you may not be aware of, but even before you play the game, you can sit down and think, okay, you're presented with X option. You may not know the entire context, but you can guess. You're not an idiot. At least the game assumes you're not. You can probably surmise what the situation would be that would lead to having you resolve the question this way. So you could surmise like how you would handle who goes off to set the bomb in Mass Effect 1, or what do you do with a giant fucking Reaper base at the end of Mass Effect 2? And it's just like, what? I mean, it wasn't an option then. It might be an option now, knowing BioWare, but and like that was the thing that like a thing that people, even if they didn't play the game, could still jump in and feel that they had options available to them and wasn't just dead set for them. There was no quote-unquote canon storyline or of canon timeline. Like, it's not the story is important, but the journey is what the game's trying to focus on more than anything else.
Yes, and that was BioWare's attempt for people who did not have all the consoles, because they were still thinking that console exclusivity, there we go, was a thing, and
was a good thing.
Was a good thing, and I was an idiot who bought an Xbox 360 solely for Mass Effect, and then dumbass me, when BioWare eventually releases the entire trilogy on PS3, I'm like, well, fuck everything.
Yeah.
Console exclusivity. That was literally what console exclusivity is for, to get people to buy a console.
And
yeah, and most studios nowadays have moved away from it, although some people still enforce it. Sony.
It's never gonna go away, guys.
I know, it's not as bad. It's not as bad as it was in 2000 and 2005 when, like, everything your grandmother you wanted to play required a PS2, an Xbox, a Nintendo 64, a Game Boy Advance, an Atari 2600 to play, and it's just like, why do I need all these things? Yeah, Neo Geo, and just like, why do I need all these fucking consoles and handhelds to play the games that are, like, actually worth playing? Like,
I was gonna say, back in my day, we didn't have all of these multi-platform games. Our ports were all original, remade from the ground up, and had nothing to do with each other, like Aladdin on the Genesis and SNES.
Isn't Lion King also completely different?
Yep, there were a bunch of them back then. There were some that were pretty much the same game on both systems, but the fact that they basically had to be rebuilt from the ground up, that you couldn't port a game over, meant that pretty much almost every game, if it was on two systems, at least had minor, if not major, differences.
You're absolutely right. Embarrassing story, but I remember being very jealous of the Super Nintendo version of the Power Rangers game because it looked better than the Sega one, and I didn't have a Nintendo, and I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, that was a thing. It's true. Like, they were completely different games from the ground up.
Let's not forget Nintendo censoring Mortal Kombat. So
since we looked back this far, Brian, this topic was about books and novels associated with games, because they couldn't put all the story in the game. You want to know what? That started with NES, because you don't know the story to any of those goddamn games unless you read the manual.
That is true.
Yeah, that is true, but at least the manual came with the game.
So you're saying if they packaged the 400-page novel with the game, just shrunk wrapped them together and sold it to you, you'd be more than happy about that?
I mean, hey, free paper if nothing else.
The manual took 5 minutes to read.
Yeah,
I know I'm trolling.
Yeah, he is. That's what he does.
But it is true to a point that video games started the underlying premise I'm getting here on the less trolling point is that from the beginning, video games were not a single experience. From the beginning, we had the manuals that told us the controls and told us the story. And as you continued, more things were brought in until we get to the point we're at right now. And it's fine with like going, okay, this is too far, or this is crossing a line. But ever pretending that the experiences were ever 100% pure without needing outside influence was never true if you came from the 80s generation.
Which is absolutely correct. I mean, somebody might argue that the reason why you had the manuals in the first place was because of the technical limitations of the hardware.
No, absolutely. But at this point we're going the reasons behind it, but it still wasn't contained within for a good reason. But
yes,
like, we're arguing levels.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily a potential chore and or money grab the way it might feel today. Like, yeah. with technology having advanced so far in the last 30 years, it's, you know, it's like, do we, why, what I would like to know is why, if it, with all of today's technology and how games are developed today, the question I would like to ask, you know, a major developer is, okay, why are you doing this? Like, you can omit bits of story from a game. You can obscure. There can be positives to obscuring the story. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, you know, communities can form to take these little bits of story and lore for.
Damn you, Brian! Don't bring up what I was going to bring up in the second half.
Well, keeping in mind that we have hit the hour mark, I'm going to consider this a segue.
Yeah, consider this a teaser for the second half. How about that?
That works.
See, this is what we do. Like, all right, that's and now Ronnie, you cut in and totally killed my mojo. Thank you very much.
Welcome,
jerk.
That's what you keep me here for.
Yes. So, because we have reached the hour mark, that's what we are going to do. We're going to cut to break here, and then on the second half, I'm going to just be locked away in the dungeon as Ronnie just commandeers the entire damn show.
I was gonna say you keep him around for cock blocking you.
Well, it's originally not for my stunning good looks.
Although you do have great hair.
Thank you. I really like my hair.
You have wonderful hair. It's like
it's flowing.
It is. It absolutely is. So yes, we're going to take the idea of obscuring narrative and start the second half with it. But in the meantime, we will cut to break. We'll have some music. I'll go read a BioShock novel or something, and
Resident Evil. I know you have those.
I do have the Resident Evil books. So. And they're fun.
They're definitely special.
You are listening to Downloadable Content. We'll be back. Welcome back to Downloadable Content, talking about stories and video games. We are all still here, I think. Unless
in some fashion or another.
In some fashion or another. Ron is a comic book. Ronnie has become a manga. Shanna is a 3-hour movie.
Ooh, just what I always wanted to be.
Does that make you the anime protagonist, Ryan?
My hair isn't wildly colored enough to be one.
No, he's the game, and we're the multimedia accompaniment.
Suddenly this is like reboot, where incoming game. But we are all
Don't get us started on that. I will spend 2 hours discussing reboot.
Childhood. But yes, back into the discussion we go. Now, I ended the first half scaring the shit out of Ronnie because he thought I was going to steal his thunder.
Yep.
So, talking about how there can be positives to obscuring a story, and, how it can be done to good effect, as opposed to going above and beyond the scope of the game. So, since Ronnie was so scared I was going to steal his dissertation from him, I'll give him the floor.
Thank you. Now,
he says begrudgingly.
Have you read your whole... okay.
I can see you adjusting your glasses from here.
I'm Megane-kun. Thanks for coming. A huge part of why this stuff is done, if you look at it from the standpoint of developers, is by obscuring the story, by making it not straightforward, by leaving pieces here and there you have to put together, or leaving things up to interpretation in a lot of ways. It is a huge, huge community building moment. This is how you get your fans talking, by giving them each different pieces. By putting stuff in your game that not everybody necessarily sees, you can get all these people collaborating to try to find out what's going on. And in a lot of the games we're talking about, that's part of where these communities came from. I mean, Dark Souls has two communities that have come together, but it has its community that is focused around the lore and solving the games and figuring out what's going on, and then its community that was built around these games are super difficult. Let's figure out the ways to beat these things. And those two things built Dark Souls into what it is. It would not have taken off the way it did if it didn't have both of those elements, because those are what built the community that everything else is based on. Before I go any farther, does anybody want to say anything about that?
No, I got nothing to say.
Okay.
No, it's a good point. When creating that hype, it creates more buzz about the game. So it's a good tool.
Absolutely, and it's part of what keeps the game. It's part of what keeps people coming back to the game, and it's part of what gets the game spread. Because when you don't give all of the pieces, or when you make it so you have to try to put all the pieces together, it lasts in your mind. When you pick up Super Mario Brothers 3, and you play a level, you can just put that back down. I mean, or you could play it for 8 hours because it's an amazing game, but it doesn't have a built-in drive for you to have to keep thinking about it. But when you deal with something where the story where the story draws you in, but the story is not direct, it's something that percolates in the back of your mind, stuff that you talk to other people about, that you think about. And all of these things, like these, make the game more impactful to people and build the community around it, which is what's going to bring more people in. And while a lot of people can be down on the games, the biggest example I'll use is Five Nights at Freddy's. That's entirely what the game is built around. Random bullshit with you need to put pieces together here. There's random occurrences. Let's all try to put all this stuff together to figure out what the fuck is going on in these games and how they interact. it deals with stuff outside of it, the ARG elements. They had websites talking to each other, where you have to read the source code of the website and see it having a discussion with his other websites. Or his books, where he put out a workbook with tons of stuff in fucking cryptography to give you information. Like, these games are built around this as a primary mechanic, and it has built a monolith. Like, they're selling Five Nights at Freddy's shit in Walmart.
Oh yeah, it's entered the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be there if not for this method of storytelling, because that's what's kept people playing these games as much, if not way more so than the gameplay.
It reminds me very much what you're describing. It has a very, like, the original Legend of Zelda feel, where it's that sort of, because the story of the original NES Legend of Zelda wasn't really, I guess, there so much, at least not obviously, that, you know, the fans were mailing, you know, back and forth, you know, tips and tricks on how to play the game, how to do this, how to do that, which, you know, eventually ultimately led to the creation of Nintendo Power magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, but then, you know, it was more of, again, the technical limitations of the hardware than a deliberate obfuscating of the story.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, and if you couldn't tell from this discussion, I'm positive on these games, because this is my wheelhouse in any form. It's the reason I love Neon Genesis Evangelion so much, because it's not straightforward. You need to piece pieces together. It has a community. There's stuff from outside of it. Like, it's... I feel better having to work at a story and come to an active understanding of the story rather than just passively taking it in. That's how I enjoy these things. It's the reason why, before they had an original Zelda timeline, I was putting together my own timeline for how this thing worked. When I was a kid, me and my friends would discuss Final Fantasy and how we could fit these games together to make them actually be in the same universe.
Ugh.
Yeah, and we actually did a pretty good one up until 8 came out.
And just ruined everything.
Well, to be fair, though, I think that's one of the reasons why some of these other outside methods get under the skin of gamers, because you're absolutely right. And a lot of gamers enjoy gaming for that reason, because gaming is already it's probably the most active entertainment pastime that there is. There's a reason why it's a form of entertainment that not everybody can get into, because you have to go get the story. It's not handed to you. And we love that as gamers. And I think there's something about when it kind of goes the other way, whereas gaming kind of goes into other medium, that it almost takes away some of that fun for us. There's something about sitting back and watching a movie. It's very passive. And I think when you go from playing, to just bring up another example, from playing 15 to sitting back and watching Kingsglaive, it almost takes something away from the gamer. And it takes something away from that enjoyment we have of going out and piecing it together and getting it all together ourselves. And in a way, I think that's why there is some pushback on this particular idea.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to use 15 as an example and not an example.
Mm-hmm.
Games, each medium has its own strengths and weaknesses, right?
Right.
Video games, movies, books, all of them have very specific strengths and weaknesses, and the way those mediums tell their stories is by emphasizing their strengths and minimizing their weaknesses. In a successful multimedia franchise, you're trying to maximize the strengths of each of those pieces of medium while minimizing their weaknesses and making it all tie together cohesively.
Yes. 15
failed at that. Just straight up. We'll be honest here. I'm not saying 15's bad. I'm saying 15 did not succeed at that.
Yes.
By most people's estimations. But
because you can feel the holes in 15. That's one of the reasons why.
Yeah. Well, once again, it is more obscure. I feel like Dot Hack, at least the original Dot Hack, pretty much nailed it out of the park on having all of them connect cohesively and not feel like any of them are taking away from the others. They're building, they're not subtracting.
It's also a thing, too, where the timeline for the Dot Hack extraneous media is very simple. There's, like, it's sign, then the games, and then the media, and then somewhere in there's a book, little short novel thing. I forget where exactly it goes in timeline, but there is a specific spot in the timeline where it goes.
Yeah, the only confusing thing in Dot Hack is the four OAV episodes, which take place in the middle of the games, but everything else is pretty linear. Like, it's just this, then this, then this, then this. And then, I mean, that is a benefit to it. Like, you don't want to confuse people too much unless it's what you're trying to do.
I have another example that does this really well. And, it's funny. My husband is a huge WoW fan.
Yep.
So I was kind of talking to him about this before we jumped on, because the WoW universe is an incredibly expanded universe.
Yep.
And he reads all the books and everything. So I was just kind of asking him, do the books and everything, like, do you need to read the books to play WoW? And he said no, but it fills in the storyline. I mean, for example, there's something in WoW called Warfronts where, the two factions that everybody knows, Alliance and Horde, are two warring factions, and they face each other. And if you just want to play the game, then that's all you have to do. But there was also a book release where there was key characters who, I guess, had dealt with some stuff, and that led to the idea of the Warfronts. And the way he described it is that the books give more flavor to the already existing universe. If you really want to dig into the lore, if you want to know more about the key characters in the game, then the books will flush that out for you, but you don't need to read the books to play the game.
Just talking about Warcraft, I mean, Blizzard has the most bullshit example of all of this of all time for me.
Okay.
So you have Warcraft 1, you have Warcraft 2. Then you have the game that was supposed to come between 2 and 3 that they canceled and is not in continuity, but enough of it is still in continuity that when you get to 3, characters from that book are now in it and were not introduced, and we don't have their backstories. That's where Thrall came from. Like, the missing game is Thrall's story being raised and everything that led up to Warcraft 3. And years later, we got that in a book, but they literally just went, yeah, we're just gonna take that and just, we're gonna take like half of this story, so you can't even consider it in canon, but we're still gonna take that half and we're not gonna give it to you anywhere else. You're just gonna have to figure it out.
I mean, I only know so much about WoW. I'm kind of I'm just being honest. I'm sort of a secondhand viewer here. Like I said, I mean, I was talking to my husband about all this.
Yeah.
But
I was a big Warcraft fan in the original Warcraft. Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3. And I played
Before
WoW.
It became cool.
I played WoW for the first. I played WoW from release. Then I quit. Then I came back for the second expansion. Played for a bit. Then I quit. Came back for the third expansion. Then I quit, and I've never played it again.
Gotcha. Well, and I think that's another thing too, is that, we can sit here and talk all day about the story, and about like they didn't build it right, but at the same time, I think you have a lot of developers who kind of have this unprecedented push to expand story. It's a lot of the same thing that happens where, we always say sequelitis, where the sequel's always not good, because they have to find new ways to keep pushing and keep this product going. And there's some good ways that you can do it, but there's some ways where you're just sort of throwing more in there, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So you never.
Well, no, my complaint was just canceling a game and then taking like half of that game's story that the players never got to play, and then using it in the next game, but without explaining it.
No, that's not
just
good
bad
decision.
design.
That's bad design. You're absolutely right. But I guess I'm just saying, like, on the flip side, they did do a good job of at least supplementing a lot of the story with books and manga.
Yeah.
He said there was audio dramas, but again,
Yeah.
that's if you really want to dig into the lore and you really want to get to know more about it.
Which is the reason I played Warcraft. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a story person.
I'm
Oh,
sensing
I
a
too.
theme here.
I can enjoy games without a plot. A game like Mario. But you want to know what? Unlike everybody else, I can only play so much of those. I get bored of just good gameplay. I need a story to drive me forward. Like, it takes me forever to finish a game like Mario because I'll play it for an hour or two and then I'll put it down for days or weeks because I need to do something else that has a more of a driving plot to keep me wanting to play.
You mean Princess Peach being in another castle is not a big enough plot point for you to play?
No,
Yeah.
but Super Princess Peach kept me playing from beginning to end. It's a good game.
I mean, come on, Ronnie. I mean, 30 plus years of Bowser and Peach.
No, but I know you guys are just trolling me, but the premise here being like a lot of people go, well, the games are for gameplay. Games are for you sitting there and playing them, and the story is superfluous. And to those people, I'll go, like, people play games for a lot of different reasons, and I'm not going to enjoy a game that has bad gameplay, but also that story, that driving plot is what keeps me wanting to play. What makes me want to play for hours on end. Not the gameplay. The gameplay needs to be good, but I need a plot as well. For me, that's why RPGs or story-heavy action games are my genres of choice. I'm not every gamer, but you gotta have stuff for every gamer. And that's, I think, part of what this is, because there are a lot of gamers who love the stuff we're talking about, and it's about not every game has to have a gamer that loves it. But not every game has to be for every gamer.
No, you're absolutely right. That's so true.
I will just mention another genre that also like has surprisingly enough has a lot of story to it that is almost never seen.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting games.
Yeah. Oh God. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for the longest time, like just to use the example because it's the most widely recognized one, Street Fighter. Like,
I used to follow the Street Fighter story, and people would make fun of me so hard for caring about the story of a fighting game.
Yeah, and it's like this is a story that like they have a storyline for it, and it by and large fits with the universe they're setting up.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little weird in a couple of places, but I mean, it makes sense, and it's a thing that, like, yes, in theory, this could be a real life thing. When I mean, like,
it's over the top, but that's the genre.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and like the other genres of fighting games have things like that. I mean, hell, the fucking Injustice series is a giant like what if.
Let's say it's no more. It's great that you brought that up because I was literally about to say. Then again, it's no more over the top than the Marvel movies. And then you bring up Injustice, which is literally superheroes.
Yeah, and it's just a giant what if Superman goes fucking crazy.
Yeah, Injustice had an amazing story, and it's a great it's a premise that's been done to death in the comics, but I mean it's still a great premise, a classic premise for a lot of people who might not have been around in the comics, more casual people.
And it even gives the fighting games a little bit more depth. I mean, some people, I'm sure, will pick up Street Fighter and all they care about is learning all the combos. But there's somebody out there who really wants to get through each character and, like, they know that right now they are fighting for Chun-Li, who was avenging her father, or for Ryu, who is, always looking for the next fight, and all the other cheesy backstories they gave those damn characters. But it made the games more fun and engaging.
Well, I mean, here's a great example for me, because it's literally right now. Smash 4 had no story mode. I played that game, I think, 5 times total that I've owned. Because I only play it when I'm playing with a friend. And I'm an introvert. I rarely have a friend over, and when I do, it's usually for a purpose. So I'm pretty sure I played Smash 4 5 times. I've played Smash, the current Smash Ultimate, longer today than I did the entirety of Smash 4's time, because there's a story mode. I did the same thing with Brawl. Like, I was so bummed out about Smash 4 not having story mode, and because of that, I bought the game so I could play it with friends because everyone wants to play it.
Yeah.
Just to have the option. But, like, the story mode is almost, like, the time that I'm playing the World of Light, I guarantee is going to outnumber the amount of time I play it outside of that 10-1. Guarantee it.
I loved that. Just I remember so much all the fun that I had playing the Subspace Emissary.
Yes.
On Brawl, and that was just amazing. Yes. And you know, last night when I got home from my art show and I saw the Amazon package waiting for me, like, oh, this is gonna be just starting with World of Light, I'm like. First of all, I felt vindication of all the years that I get flack for using Kirby. Kirby is my best character. And I'm like, ha!
Why would you get flack? Kirby's always been a pretty high character, even if you're looking at rankings.
Well, Kirby's incredibly versatile, just because he's puppy in paint.
I do have some friends who play Smash far too seriously. So, to them, I just say, well, go to hell. But
to them, they're playing the game the way they enjoy it. But that doesn't mean that's the only way to play the game.
So, but you're right. Like, okay, you're talking about Street Fighter, but the fighting game series that I grew up on was Mortal Kombat, and you know the storyline of Shao Kahn and Shang Tsung needing to win 10 consecutive Mortal Kombat tournaments before they're allowed to take over before they're allowed to invade and take over Earthrealm. You know, that's the original tenet of the first game, which they then made into a hilariously cheesy and wonderful movie that I will watch anytime. But
with one of the most iconic songs, everybody can hear it in their head right now.
So yes.
Don't forget. There's also a Street Fighter movie. There's actually several of them, but you know what I mean.
Yes. Of course.
Yes, one of them even has Sakura, and it made me super happy.
Oh, I miss you, Raul Julia.
Don't we all?
Don't we all? But yeah, I mean, I totally see that now. Like, yeah, fighting games may not have the deep, rich, layered story that an RPG might. So, you know,
but kind of like what we're talking about here, most of the fighting games, to get the complete story, you need to play multiple characters and piece together all the stuff.
Yes, you
literally
do.
Exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly, and you know, like, I remember some of the extra stuff that was done for Mortal Kombat. Like, there was an animated series or two.
Yep.
There's a animated short for between 2 and I forget the timeline for fucking 2 and between 2 and 3 for Street Fighter, but like to introduce Akuma and be like, why is Akuma fucking important? And, and just like, yeah, he's important for X, Y,
and Goken and like all that.
Yeah.
It's going to be it's
and then tons of comics and manga have been done on both sides of the ocean.
Yep.
For Street Fighter.
Yes. So it's
hell. They even have rival schools, a completely separate game in the exact same continuity.
Yep.
Yeah. Just to
hell
explain,
yeah, rival schools.
Hell yeah, rival schools.
Just explain away why Sakura in what's the ninja girl name? Inari, Izuna?
Izuru? Izaku? Something like that.
Yeah, let's explain away why these two fucking schoolgirls know fucking kung fu and ninjutsu.
Play rival schools, it's a whole game full of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of high schoolers that just know kung fu and ninja bullshit for some dumb reason.
Well, okay, wait. It is Street Fighter. Look at all of those characters. Tell me where Guile learned sonic booms working in the Air Force. it makes more sense that the teenagers are being trained in this stuff, because it explains where all the Street Fighter adults come from.
That's a good point.
And watch, you're going to get an internet comment to some wiki article that explains all this.
Hey, okay, wait. I'm gonna head off the comments right now. I'm a nerd. I know all about Street Fighter, and nobody here would be surprised that Sakura is my favorite character. And I will own you if you start to challenge my knowledge.
You come into my house.
Come into my house.
Ronnie just dropped a "don't at me."
Oh.
I was gonna say, like, so wait. I didn't know we were already doing Chicago quotes already. You guys haven't even been here yet.
You notice when we talked about having a big meetup, we all talked about meeting up at Brian. Brian, you are more than welcome to go down to Chicago and see Ron. Like,
oh yes, I'm aware of that.
The other way.
I'm aware of that.
Stuff
my face full of the thing they call pizza.
Hey, Chicago style.
It's a casserole. Let's be honest.
Hey, I don't care. It's a delicious casserole.
Oh yeah, no, it's a delicious amalgamation of bread, cheese, meats, sauces, and just pure unadulterated fats to just clog your arteries.
To get back on the actual topic of this podcast, I mean, I think what I was getting down to is that I think a lot of the difficulties that they put up, the roadblocks they put up to giving you story in a lot of these games is to build the community, is to make it so everybody can kind of see something and try to come together with other people to try to put the story together, because that community building is so important to the longevity of any game.
Oh yes.
And especially for indie games, this is a big way of doing it.
And I think that, you know, developers and just industry makers and in general are finally starting to understand a little bit that you can't just put content out there and expect people to buy it. And when you build a community that's and a long-lasting community like that, your checks write themselves.
Yeah,
that does a lot of the marketing for you.
There's a reason.
Right.
I was gonna say there's a reason the last 2 FNAF games were given out for free to the fans, because he's made $1 billion at this point. And he doesn't need the money, but he built that because of the community. He made that money because of the community, and because of the way he did the games and how they resonated with people. And that's true for a lot of these. They found a method of storytelling that resonated with the fan base and that brought fans together. And it may not have resonated with everyone, but it resonated with enough people. And it's the underlying premise for anything creative, where you would rather have 10 people who love your work to death and will evangelize your work than 100 people who are okay with your work. Because those 10 people will bring more people in. Those 10 people will find the other ones. Not every game has to hit the mainstream. There's a reason niche games can do well, and that's because that niche audience is starving for titles. And you might not be accessing 10 million people, but you want to know what? If you make your game for, $100,000, but this audience will give you $1 million, you still made 10 times your investment.
And they'll keep investing.
Yeah, exactly.
As you make more games, you have a guaranteed audience.
For reference, I'll mention this super giant game. Sorry, Bastion. Like that was like what 10, 20 people, and it sold so fucking well that they made Transistor, and like Transistor is the one that like made people go, "Oh shit, these guys are actually real good."
Transistor's my favorite, and once again, it's one where it has a story you have to piece together from a bunch of different places to figure it out.
And community is even more important, especially if you're talking indie devs. That sense of community to piece together a game story is even more important because they indie devs typically don't have the money of the AAA devs to make supplemental or quote unquote required additional pieces of media like additional movies, comics, things like that. So it's even more important, whereas, Square can go off and make, Kingsglaive and, make it so that, you need to see that to get a better sense of Final Fantasy 15. But, us gamers who like Final Fantasy will be like, really? Why the fuck did you do that? Whereas indie devs don't have that luxury. They can't take that risk.
Mm-hmm.
No, they can't.
And it's kind of funny because we started this off talking about Dark Souls. And I'll say, I feel like Dark Souls, while it's definitely a AAA game, has a lot of the trappings of an indie game. With the way it treats its players, the way it tells its story, the way, a lot of the stuff feels more reminiscent of indie games than of the current AAA games.
I mean, I can't really add too much to that because I played the first Dark Souls for about an hour or two before I said, fuck it, I'm tired
of dying!
I'm gonna break something. So... any sort of sense of story and lore and community for Dark Souls was completely destroyed with me not being able to progress past the first couple of hours of the game. So,
okay, that's fine. Once again, as we said, not every game is for everyone. Right. Let's put an example. I don't play first-person shooters, therefore, Overwatch is not a game for me. I like games with deep, in-depth lore. Therefore, Dark Souls is a game for me. We all have these differences. But, the underlying premise of the article, because we've been more positive, the article, I feel like, was pretty negative on the whole premise of games that force you to work for your story. And the difference is, it's not forcing you to work for your story, because you're not forced to play the game. You can go, this game isn't for me. This game is appealing to a different demographic. This game is appealing to different people. And be okay with that. It's like every game... Some gamers feel like every game... They need to play every game, and every game has to be for them. And I don't get that. We all have genres we're not going to play. Or at least types of game, or at least styles of games we're not going to play. How is this any different?
Well, I think it's also because games didn't always have such expanded genres. And, well, let's be honest, when we first all started playing video games, they were just video games. They were just a genre of entertainment unto itself. And as gaming expanded, so did the types of games, and then you had the breakouts of genres. So maybe there's still some entitlement there where people think that, well, why are they putting these games out? And it's like, well, because there's other people that they do cater to. For example, I know we've laughed about, Madden on these on previous episodes, but somebody out there really loves Madden. So,
yeah,
you're absolutely right. It's just a matter of everything doesn't appeal to everybody.
I'm never going to play Call of Duty, but I don't have a problem. I don't have an issue with Call of Duty existing.
Yeah.
I feel like some people take offense to games that don't appeal to them existing, and that they don't understand why these are being made because it doesn't appeal to them. Why would it appeal to anyone? And to me, that there's a lot of entitlement there. There's a lot of not even necessarily entitlement, but a bit of that as well. But maybe a tunnel vision where these people don't understand or have empathy with other people and really be able to see that other people have different preferences in gaming. There's more than one reason to game.
Well, going back to that article, maybe that's sort of a bit of that as well, is that the genres also tend to blend and borrow from what other genres of game and film and everything else are doing. So take example, going back to the article, he was talking about Overwatch. Maybe there's somebody who feels the same way about Overwatch, but that's because they've been playing games akin to it that don't have that factor. They started out with Doom or with, GoldenEye or something, and made their way to Wolfenstein. And, I don't know, like maybe that was their progression and that's what they know. So once they hit something like Overwatch, this is a new concept to them, is having to branch out to get more of the game than what's already in there. And then they're like, well, what the hell is this? So that's the only counter I can think of as to why people might get that entitlement, is because even the genres themselves in games are not always so cut and straight. And they, developers will see something from another type of game and say, oh, that works. Maybe we should try it and see how it works in our set.
I suppose that kind of goes into something I have felt for a long time, and I know there's going to be kickback to my opinion on this, and that is, I don't think anybody should just go and buy a game based off of its name anymore. Like, I have to look up reviews on games, and part of that is because, like, a game can be completely different than what you thought it was going to be. And reading about it is the only way you're going to actually know what this game is going to be like when you're playing it. And at this point, it's so true. Like, it's not even just looking at it and going, oh, this is a 9 out of 10. I should probably look at that. No. Don't look at it. Don't look at the 9 out of 10 and go, I need to play the game. Look at it and read what it tells you and go, it's a 9 out of 10, but man, it's a competitive cooking RPG? Maybe that's not my genre.
Read the fucking article.
Maybe. But that's what I think what a lot of people do. Like, there are a lot of gamers, and I know some of these personally that'll go, these were the 10 out of 10 games this year that are going to be up for Game of the Year this year. I need to play every one of them. And then they'll go, I hated this game. This is like, why did people enjoy this? And I go, well, for pretty much the same reasons you hate it. Like, did you look into it? Well, it was a 10 out of 10. Well, that doesn't say anything. Like, a 10 out of 10 first-person shooter is not going to appeal to me because I don't like first-person shooters. But that doesn't mean it's not 10 out of 10. That doesn't mean it's not the best first-person shooter ever. It's just what it's the best at is not what I enjoy. And that's true in everything.
Well, yeah, that's like watching everything that's up for Oscar Movie of the Year, only that takes a lot less time. So.
Yes. Significantly less time, but exactly the same idea. Sorry, I feel like I've been dominating for a while.
It's a lot less self-flagellation, or self-fellatio, and more, actually talking about all the shit that they're presenting.
Yeah. So I feel like I've said my piece. I've spoken for a long time. Somebody else take the mic.
Just give me that. I found, the most interesting aspect of the article that I thought was, it was his closing paragraph, and, we've already... it's already been well established, people enjoy games for different reasons, and as we've already gone to at length, again, going back to Overwatch, a large portion of the Overwatch fan base, they enjoy the game as the shooter that it is, and really don't need anything else. They enjoy the premise of the game. And he compares, he's like, just as hardcore Destiny players have embraced this approach to understanding the narrative because of its awesome gameplay and addictive loop. But it was the last couple of sentences that remained in my brain. He said, quote, however, I play games more than I read comics or watch movies because that's how I prefer to consume my entertainment. When a game I love takes this approach to storytelling, I don't enjoy it. I simply tolerate it. So, there's something to mention in there as well. It's like, it made me think, like, how, okay, of all the media that I consume, what is the method that I use the most? And it is, for me, like the writer, it is mostly video games. That's how I consume my media. I don't go to, I don't go to the movies all that much. I barely watch any TV.
Mm-hmm.
I do a significant amount of reading. I do enjoy reading, but video games are, yes, they are a large part of my media consumption. So there was a little bit of an agreement, at least for me personally, because I'm not, really a movie person or a TV person. So to me, having to go beyond the scope of the game to get the full experience, it does in a way feel to me like a chore. Like, oh, it's like, well, I've already sunk so many hours into a particular game, now I have to sink more time, watching a TV series or a movie or two to get, it's like, I don't have, part of it is I just don't have time for that.
That is a big factor. I mean, a lot of the gaming community, there's part of the gaming community that totally has time for this, but a lot of us are grown-ass adults with jobs and chores and things we have to take care of. So we already have only so much time for these leisure activities. And I think gaming and books are probably the most time-consuming bits of entertainment to sustain. Maybe TV shows, depending on how long they've been running. So yeah, I mean, most of us, I think, when we sit down and we get a new game, especially something that's story-driven, we know we're about to make a big-time commitment. We know we're about to commit 60 hours of our lives over the year or 2 years or 6 months or month or whatever to this video game. So it could sort of feel a little bit startling to know that you just added on another piece to that and it's not even part of the game. It's now you have to go out and buy this movie or look for it on Netflix or whatever. So I completely understand where you're coming from with that.
I would say a lot of that is targeting, because a lot of the things, especially Five Nights at Freddy's, but several other games we mentioned on here, they're targeted at a younger demographic than us, who, I don't know about everybody here, but I'm in my mid-30s.
Same.
And, for a lot of these, when I was a teenager and I'm trying to find all the information I can on Neon Genesis Evangelion, going through the internets and trying to find websites from Japan to get these pieces of information that aren't here, that's what they're tapping into. They're tapping into the people who, when we play a game, not everybody, and it's not true for every game, but as older people, when we play a game, a lot of times it's, okay, I'm really enjoying this, but, I don't want you to tack another 10 hours on. Meanwhile, for a lot of younger people, at least it was for me back then, no, I want all of the content you can give me. I want more. And that's part of what a lot of this community building stuff is it lets them continue talking and being involved in the game long after you stop playing the game.
But I think it works a little bit better when there's ways of doing it and ways of not doing it. And just to bring back the WoW example, I could go and play WoW right now, and I don't need to read the books. But if I go and play Final Fantasy 15, I need to watch Kingsglaive. And I think that's where that balance kind of happens, where it's great if there's something you get into, if there's a game you get into and you really want to expand the lore and get into the lore, then those options are out there for you. But if you just want to sit down and have a standalone game experience, then that is offered to you as well. And I think that's where the line blurs, is when, and I think that's kind of where the article was going, was it's a problem when you can't sit down and enjoy a standalone game without these other puzzle pieces and components that have to 100% be consumed in order to get the full experience. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I think 15... I mean, it's a great example because it proves your point, but I think 15 isn't the greatest example just because 15, as we said, just didn't execute well.
No, it didn't.
If it had executed it proper, if Kingsglaive was expanding it rather than being critical pieces that were missing, I don't think there would be as much of a problem. But the problem was
absolutely 100%.
The game was missing critical pieces.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And that's the wrong way of going about it. But like when we talk about like a Dark Souls or a FNAF, that's baked in. Like you either like that or you don't, because that's the whole premise of the game.
Right.
Is we're not spoon feeding you the story. You're gonna have to work to find the story. Like that is gameplay.
Yes.
Like that is its own form of gameplay. The way they choose to tell the story is gameplay. And 15, first of all, it didn't execute it well, but second of all, I would argue that it was not what its fan base was looking for, because it has an established fan base with an established way of telling the story, and they were trying something new, and it didn't work out because, like, once again, as I said, not every game has to be for everyone, but they can absolutely miss what their demographic is, especially when you have a predetermined. I mean, I'll go back to FNAF. They put out a Five Nights at Freddy's RPG, and it bombed because that's not. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but one of them being that was not what the fan base was looking for from the series. Final Fantasy 15, that method of having to put the story together was not what its fans were looking for.
And, you know, maybe with Final Fantasy, they've had success before with sort of building off of a series, so maybe they were just trying something different. Like, for example, 7 has a huge expanded universe. But you can sit down and play 7 front to back. And that doesn't mean you need to watch Advent Children. That doesn't mean you need to watch, I forget the name of the anime film that they made. Before Crisis, thank you. Like, and I think that's the key difference.
Or play Crisis Core, or play the phone game, or listen to the audio dramas. Which I did all of those things because I'm an obsessive person.
A drop.
But it's all there. But that's the thing.
It's all there, yeah.
It built off of 7. 7 was the base, and then everything else sprouted from it.
Yes.
And for RPGs, I think that's a very effective way of doing it. But even then, you get into... When you start playing the expanded universe stuff, like, the stuff from Dirge of Cerberus doesn't make sense unless you've seen Advent Children, which, like, each of the things all ties together. It's just that 7 is the basis for all of them. So I suppose that's kind of the same way. It doesn't affect 7, it affects everything else.
Right. But again, you don't need to... You can play, as Shanna said, you can play Final Fantasy VII and have the full experience without needing to feel that you have to play any of the other extra games or consume the extra media to get the full... I mean, you could play 7 front to back and feel fully satisfied.
I mean, that's unless you're playing the 7 remake, and then you're going to get it under a subscription service, and there's going to be about 12 chapters of it.
I fully expect the 7 remake to come out after we're dead. That's that's just Square for you. But, you know, until proven otherwise, I'm going to give Final Fantasy VII Remake the same vaporware thought in my head as I have with Kingdom Hearts 3. Until it actually comes out, I don't believe it exists.
I personally look forward to playing it while I'm sitting comfortably at Ramapo Manor Nursing Home.
What, Kingdom Hearts 3 or Final Fantasy VII?
Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Just sitting there in your dotage, you know,
telling my grandchildren what it was like playing the first one. I can't wait.
With the square blocky people and Barrett cursing in punctuation marks. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So
what, Mommy? What does 4 asterisks in a row mean?
Well, Sonny, you see. So I think I have said all I want to say. So I'm good with ending here, unless anyone has some final thoughts.
Dot hack is incredibly underrated, and more people should play it. Dot hack for remake. Dot hack for 2018.
Dot hack for president.
It's better than
Couldn't do
what's
any
there
worse.
currently. Yeah.
Well, dot hack, a better president than Lord Dampnut. So,
I love how that's the closing thoughts of this podcast.
I think
It all went to that.
Ron, please save us.
I was gonna say, I think the thing to take away from this is there's ways to do it properly, and there's ways to do it poorly. If you're a game developer, maybe take some of the things you said and write them down for yourself to refer to when you're designing your game, so you can go, these assholes actually made some fairly salient points. Maybe we should take them into consideration when designing our game, and any sort of extraneous marketing we might have for it.
What? Tanya? Are we bringing Tanya in here? Is that...
What?
That was a joke about the one game developer we know.
Oh, okay. I'm like, where the hell are you going?
I mean, and I guess the thing to wrap up too is, I guess the rest of my thing is, yes, there's a lot of games out there that do this, but as long as it's nothing that's like too obtrusive or like very taking it. What is the word I'm looking for? The word is taking advantage of your audience for your monetary gain.
Exploiting them?
Yeah, exploiting them. Like, as long as you're not exploiting your audience, I think more information of your game, like the backstory of the world, what have you, that's not a bad thing. You just need to not give it to us like a hamster bottle and drip feed us.
Although that's an adorable mental image.
What, us being drip fed story?
I'm sorry, you mentioned a hamster drinking out of a hamster bottle. It sounded adorable.
Well, I mean, hamsters are cute for different reasons than that.
I just imagine just getting our story intravenously, just with a saline drip, but,
Well, until we get to that point, we have all of these wonderful games that have so many different methods of giving us the story just the way we need it.
Yes, we do. Yeah, you sounded very Fred Rogers there. But, all right, I think we've run out of words, so... If any of you out there have any thoughts, questions, comments that you want to hurl at us on this episode or any other episode of Downloadable Content, you can let us know on our website, dlcpodcast.com, by clicking the feedback button. You can also get a hold of us on Facebook, Downloadable Content, or Twitter at DL Content. And every single episode can be found on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and the website as well. So, well done, everybody. All it remains for me to do is to thank Ron, Ronnie, and Shanna for being on this episode. We have one more left to close out 2018 with, the year that has lasted 700. So be on the lookout for that. It is going to be a free play episode to close it all out with. So until then, I am Brian. Have a good one, everybody.